Okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 14th, 2020 Board of Education meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, we are now underway, and as expected, we've hit some bumps. So we would certainly like to thank our community members for your patience and understanding. This wasn't expected to be easy, but we have a plan in place, and Dr. Rogers will speak more on this. But we wish you well, and we hope today for the Southwood students that their virtual learning was successful. I'd like to also thank the Central Administration staff for their tireless efforts throughout the summer and continuing. They just have been working very hard to support our administrators during obviously the planning session, and now the planning is underway, and we've hit some bumps. They are continuing to help our administrators do their best work. So thanks to all of you for that. Dr. Rogers, do you want to say a few words?
Sure.
Just to welcome.
Sure. Welcome back to the new school year to everyone. We had the wonderful opportunity to meet last week with a number of middle school and elementary PTA groups. And I think we're all delighted to be back in school and have the opportunity for staff and students alike to see one another after 6 months apart. Obviously, these have been most unusual times, most challenging times for all of us. What I said to all of the PTA groups that I had an opportunity to address is that I'm so proud of how this community has really pulled together in a time of adversity, and with our students leading the way with initiatives that clearly show their heart and soul and their own willingness to be part of the effort to fight the pandemic. We have been working literally since the moment we closed on how to figure out how to reopen. And as Ms. Frankel said, there have been a number of people who have worked very hard at the reopening plan that we put together. I'll talk a little bit later about the events of the last day and a half, but the reopening plan that we put together was intended to do two things. It was intended first to be able to go seamlessly between live instruction and virtual instruction, recognizing that, as I've said multiple times since March, we are likely 6 months into what is probably going to be an 18-month crisis. And as a result, we need to be prepared literally for anything and for things to change on a daily basis. And so if we didn't have a plan that was agile enough and nimble enough to switch from one mode of learning to another, we weren't going to be able to get through what we knew would be inevitable bumps along the way. The second thing that we wanted to do with our plan was design it in such a way that even if there was a person in our learning environment that was ill, that other people would not be considered close contacts. And so we built a plan that included 6 feet of social distance between everyone, that included structured mask wearing, limited mask breaks, emphasis on having high quality masks, and plexiglass barriers, as we're using here tonight and as are present in the classrooms, frequent hand washing and more opportunities for hand washing, all of the things that we know reduce the transmission. And when you look at what does and does not constitute a close contact, we worked very hard to build an environment where people could be in the environment together and not be considered close contacts of one another. So that took a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of resources, and we're now having the opportunity to see that plan at work. So I do welcome everyone back. I know that the teachers are very excited to be with kids again. We're certainly excited to see students in the school. I'm delighted to see students, and I'll have more to say about reopening. I know that the board has a couple of housekeeping things to do before my official report.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rogers. Okay, we'll begin with approval of the minutes of August 10th, 2020. May I have a motion, please? Rob Gershon, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? There's a slight delay maybe as I'm watching the board members on the screen. So if you can raise your hands, I guess quicker when I ask the questions, that way your hands won't be mistaken for a abstention or an opposition. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Approval of the minutes of August 26th, 2020. May I have a motion, please? Krista Filippo, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Dr. Ruffo, please, may we have the treasurer's report?
Yes. As indicated in the treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end July 31st, 2020 was $130,267,857.28. The report also shows bank balances for all cash accounts were reconciled to the book balances and were collateralized in accordance with the district's banking agreements and investment policy.
Thank you, Dr. Ruffo. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Chris Ulrich, seconded by Susan Falcove. Are there any questions? All in favor? Oh, Tom Rotolo, was that a question? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Dr. Rogers with the superintendent's report.
Thank you, and again, welcome back, everyone. It feels good to be doing board meetings back in the Southwoods Auditorium again. This is still not our usual equipment and our usual format. The staff that were going to put the auditorium back into shape for our monthly board meetings were out of school today because they're also housed at Southwoods Middle School. But we did do extensive cleaning of the building over the weekend, and I felt confident, the board felt confident that we could come and hold our board meeting here in the auditorium. So we're here, but we're doing a Zoom meeting even though we're physically here in the building. I also want to just start with some good news. Obviously, there's current events to discuss, but we just got news last week that we had 32 National Merit semifinalists. And I'm going to put some photographs up here, and I am going to find and read the names of these wonderful scholars. This is what they call in the radio world down dead air. I apologize. There we go. So these young people, there are 32 of them. What's significant about that is it's more than double what we had last year, 14. So they are William Akunovitz, Arjun Chadha, Stella Chen, Evan Chang, Michael Chu, Anushka Delvi, Brian Gao, Simran Goel, Shreyas Goswami, Esther Han, Hamza Iqbal, Alex G, Michael Kopatz, Joshua Langman, Ariane Lee, Bori Liu, Angela Mao, Jenny O, Amanda Kian, Giselle Reskina, Jacob Rosenberg, Trisha Sinha, Nolan Smithwick, Alexa Trapani, Ayush Turakia, Emma Van Dorn, Eric Wang, Laura Weinberg, Max Yin, Joshua Yun, and Kevin Zhao. And congratulations to all of them. And a special congratulations to Max Yin, who is on that list. He was also named as a finalist in the Biology Olympiad. He's going on to represent the United States in the international competition. So congratulations to him as well. We also have 3 other recognitions, 3 scholar artists. This is an award that's given by the Long Island Arts Association, and these recognize students who have distinguished themselves both as academicians and as artists. And they are Ariane Lee in visual arts, Alexandra Donach in theater, and Evan Cheng in music. So congratulations to all of those students. And one final congratulations to the high school. We were named once again in the US News and World Report rankings as a high school of distinction, 276 nationally and 35th in New York State. And congratulations to the high school staff for how hard they work. I do want to talk a little bit about some of the administration of this year. This has obviously been a year like no other, a challenging year to say the least, but one that we've put a lot of planning and thought into. And again, I just want to thank, of course, my own team, the administrators of the district, the nearly 100 people who participated in our reopening task force, teachers, partners in the community, parents, and others. So much thought and effort went into building this plan so that it would be as robust as possible and would be strong enough to withstand some of the inevitable challenges that we knew were going to be thrown our way. I also want to thank and spend just a moment recognizing the custodial and maintenance staff of the district. That normally summer is their busiest time of year as they dismantle all the buildings, do deep cleaning, and then put the buildings back together. This summer, we asked them to do not just all of their usual work, but a tremendous amount of additional work besides removing casework from classrooms, redoing floors, literally rebuilding buildings, taking all the furniture out of classrooms, replacing it with furniture that made more sense for social distancing. Just an incredible amount of work, all while having a lot of contractors on site in the district that were doing heating, ventilation, air conditioning work, the air conditioning and heating filtration projects. Just so much work going on. They had to work around, and they were really doing just tireless work this summer. So I'm particularly appreciative of all of their efforts and want to recognize them. So that said, we encountered what we knew would be some inevitable difficulties with arrival and dismissal. When we did the survey of the public, over 50% of parents said that they would not use the bus on a daily basis. And we began to build a transportation plan based on that survey. Then when we asked if people would officially opt out of busing, the number dropped significantly. Only about 20% opted out of busing. So we had to build routes based on what we knew about the plans parents had shared with us. But we recognized that even though we were going to build bus routes based on who did and did not opt out, that it was likely that we would see significant numbers of cars arriving at campuses, both for arrival and dismissal. So it's important to note that arrival is a much easier proposition than dismissal, because with arrival, it doesn't matter where the kid comes from, they all walk through the same door before they go somewhere else in the building. So that's sort of a many goes into one. That's an easy thing to do. Dismissal is much more challenging, particularly at the elementary school, where students are responsible, where we're responsible for making sure the right student gets in the right vehicle every single time. And getting hundreds of students out of a single building and getting them always into the right vehicle while there are lots of vehicles lined up has been a huge challenge. Moreover, some campuses simply lend themselves to this challenge better than others. Some campuses have large parking lots or have large enough loops that they can accommodate many cars simultaneously, and they're able to kind of manage the traffic flow. There are other buildings, particularly elementary schools, that are on very busy roads. And those roads were never designed, and those campuses were never designed to accommodate huge amounts of car traffic. So that's an ongoing problem that we're going to have to deal with. I have seen an uptick in the number of parents that are asking to put their children back on buses. Obviously, the more students that we're able to get on buses, the better this challenge becomes, particularly at the end of the day. I know that there has been a lot of parent interest, and I know a lot of people built plans around the hope that they would be able to have their children carpool with other families at the end of the day. We certainly understand that that would make the traffic problems better. And we also understand that that may be a convenience for parents that is literally part of their plan for how to get through this school year. And what we're working on is trying to develop plans that allow us to do that safely, where we can be sure that the right student gets in the right vehicle with the right grown-up on 100% of the time. So that is a challenging proposition. It's something that we've started working on, and I hope to be able to have more to say about that once we get through these first couple of weeks. I know most of the buildings have made literally daily changes as they've observed arrival and dismissal. They've made tweaks. They observe how the tweaks work, and then they make additional tweaks again after that. I know there's also been a lot of interest and expectations around air conditioning, ventilation, air filtration, air quality generally. The school district has invested an enormous amount of resources and energy into air quality initiatives this summer. And the next business day after the governor announced on August 7th that we would be returning to school, the board held its August board meeting and issued me emergency authorization to expedite all of that work. We secured contractors and worked throughout the month of August to make sure that we had adequate ventilation, fresh air ventilation in every room. We're upgrading the filters in our heating and ventilation equipment wherever possible. And we're still finalizing the air conditioning project. It's important to note that the new air conditioners that are being installed are not intended as ventilation devices. They're not intended to bring in fresh air. They're intended to cool the air. The ventilation is actually accomplished by what are called HVUs, the heating and ventilation units. These are large units that would ordinarily just operate when we're in the heating season, but we're running them constantly now, obviously with the heat off, but to provide fresh air ventilation in rooms. And then we're controlling that temperature with air conditioning. There have been a number of challenges with this air conditioning project, even before COVID. This has been something that the board and I have been working on to try and get right. It's been a very challenging project that we've been working on over the course of the last 18 months or so. Several of the buildings are now complete, and as each new building is brought online, we're removing the window air conditioners from that building and moving them to a building that is not as far along in the permanent construction project. So with each passing week, we will have more and more of the district covered with air conditioning. One of the challenges there has been that the factories that manufacture the equipment that we're using are, one, out of state, and two, also experiencing, one of the factories experienced a COVID-related shutdown. So they had to stop the factory producing for several weeks while they waited to deal with an outbreak. And that has, of course, delayed the shipping of the equipment that we had on order from the factory. In addition, some of the travel restrictions for out-of-state travel have posed a complication for the equipment that is being shipped from states that are on the New York State travel quarantine list. And that has introduced some additional delays as well. However, I do believe that 2 more buildings will be completed this week, and that will again free up more window air conditioners that can be moved into the remaining buildings. And I do think that as the weeks go by, things will get progressively better. We have started and are quite far along with the 2 auditorium air conditioning projects One is this auditorium, and that's part of the reason why the streaming situation is not up and running. It was all completely dismantled for the summer, and a lot of that reassembly was happening this week and was going to be completed over the weekend, but was interrupted by this weekend's events, and also the high school auditorium. The final pieces of equipment for both of these projects are scheduled to be delivered a little bit later in the fall. So we hope to have those projects completed as well. And then lastly, there's a considerable amount of site work that has been done, particularly to the high school, Southwoods Middle School campus. We recognize that there was a tremendous amount of car traffic, particularly to the high school prior to our COVID-related shutdown. And we knew that that traffic was going to be even more intense after we reopened, and we tried to put into place additional pathways, both to drain more cars off of Southwoods Road and have places for people to stage pickups with children and to be able to re-enter traffic safely. The one thing that we have no way of doing is making Southwoods Road wider or faster or better. And we have no way of improving the timing of the lights at the south end of the road where it crosses Syosset Woodbury Road and Convent Road. Those continue to be bottlenecks in the process, but we've certainly done as much as we possibly can to the campus to try and streamline traffic from here. So we continue to tweak bus routes. We continue to tweak our dismissal in particular. And the one challenge that we know we have because of the way busing works is that the same buses that ferry high school kids home return, and ferry middle school kids, and then return and ferry elementary school kids. So if there is any delay at any point in the process, those delays cascade down to the middle school and then to the elementary school. And so it's important for us to be able to run high school quickly and smoothly, and the middle school as smoothly as possible, so that buses get to the elementary schools as early as possible, because that just makes everything go smoother. So we anticipated it would be a bumpy first week. I anticipate it's going to be a bumpy second week. And my hope is that by the time we get into the third week, we will have done the best we can with what we have available to us in terms of the campuses that we have. And then we'll begin to see if there's anything that can be done from a resource perspective to improve things further. I do want to talk a little bit about some processes and procedures. So one of the things that's going to be important is to make sure that we have a lot of consistency in how we operate as a learning community, how we operate in every classroom. And we built a plan over the summer. We've communicated that plan. We did the reopening plan. We've done the FAQs, but we're going to continue to put out information about how we want the plan to be implemented. We're going to expect it to be implemented similarly in most buildings, in all buildings, of course, in terms of health and safety protocols. In terms of how classrooms are structured, those are going to be different from building to building because there are so many unique conditions in every building. One of the things that the board has consistently asked the administration to do, asked me as the leader of the organization to do, is to make sure that students have a comparable experience no matter what building they're in, elementary, among the elementary schools or among the middle schools. And we're making sure that every student is going to get the same great education, but the way we're going to arrive there is probably going to look a little bit different because the situations in every building are dissimilar. For example, some buildings have a much higher proportion of students who are attending virtually than attending in person. Some buildings simply have more square footage per person than other buildings do. And both of those factors pose significant logistical challenges that simply can't be ignored. So because of that, every building principal has developed a plan that works within the students that they have on site and the students that they have attending virtually, that works with the shape and size and capacity of the classrooms and other common spaces that they have in the buildings, and works with the staffing that they have. The district is invested and the board has supported the investment of significant resources into staffing in order to be able to maximize the number of students on site. So the board gave me and the administration some pretty ambitious goals at the beginning of this process to try and maximize the number of students who could return to instruction in person. And that has been the charge all along for the task force and for the administration to try and find a way to meet that goal. So we have done that. It is involved at the elementary level and the middle school level, the use of additional staff that we've been calling co-pilots who provide supervision and support to students in addition to the classroom teachers that often co-plan with the classroom teachers and make sure that we can have as many students in the building as possible. And that's what has enabled us to do 5 days per week, K through 8. Unfortunately, there's just not enough physical space at the high school to do the same thing. So we are using an every other day methodology at the high school to try and have students present as much as they can be and still attending virtually so that they keep up. This is all new to all of us. And as I've said in some of the community communications, no one has ever done this before at this kind of scale. So we don't flatter ourselves to think we're going to get it perfect on the first try. We do think that we have a good plan, and we do think that as we get more and more experience with what we're doing, that we're going to get better and better at it. And what I've explained to the administration is that, my hope is that they try new things, they build on the things that work well, they abandon the things that didn't work as expected, and they continue to iterate and improve. And I would ask the public to be equally patient with teachers and building leaders as they go through this process of trying something new and getting better and better at it over time. I do think that where we'll be in 3 weeks is going to be a lot better than where we are today. And I think where we'll be in 3 months is going to put where we are in 3 weeks to shame. So I have just tremendous confidence in our teachers and our building leaders. I know how smart they are. I know how hard they work. I know how dedicated they are to seeing students here succeed. And I know that if we give them the space and encouragement to do their best work, that they will absolutely rise to that challenge. But there will be some time and adjustment needed to get there. A lot of that has gone on already. I'm so impressed with what I've already seen just in these first 5 days of school relative to where we were last March and April and May. And I can only imagine the growth that's coming next. I do want to talk a little bit about the events of the last day and a half and just bring the public up to date. Probably as this board meeting was about to go live, you received some kind of an automated communication from the school district letting you know that we're going to continue one more day of virtual learning for Southwoods Middle School tomorrow. The building, obviously, we feel very confident is safe, which is why we're here. But this has been a challenging circumstance to work through because it has involved the coordination of 2 different county departments of health. That has added just some logistical friction into the process that we're accustomed to. We worked in the spring in March and April with the Nassau County Health Department on a couple of situations and have a very good working relationship with them. They're extraordinarily professional and competent and accessible, which I really appreciate. And they give us very good concrete direction and advice. As we've said all along, the county health departments are in the driver's seat when it comes to contact tracing. It is their mandate. They are responsible for it. Our job is to support them in any way that we can through class lists, attendance rosters, etc. So we've been supporting them in that contact tracing work that they've been doing, but this coordination between the 2 counties has introduced an additional variable into the equation that has taken a little bit of time. I do anticipate that process to be completed midday tomorrow, and then we'll be able to make some announcements about what we'll be doing next as a school district. But I was in contact with the Nassau County Department and indirectly the Suffolk County Department and with the school physician today, we all believe that what we're doing tomorrow is exactly the right decision. We're all in agreement, all 4 entities all agree that this is the right course of action, that this is the safe course of action. And so we're being conservative, cautious, and measured because since this is our first experience of this kind, we're going to be incredibly methodical as we go through this first. And then we'll obviously learn a little bit from this and we'll be better prepared if hopefully we don't have to go through another experience like this, but in all likelihood, we probably will. And we'll certainly have learned a little bit from this experience that will make us better at it in the future. So we know that this is going to be a year of challenges. We know that this is going to be a year that is going to require extraordinary patience from everyone, extraordinarily hard work on behalf of the people who work in the school district at every level and in every role. This will not be an easy year for anyone, but I do think that this can be a year that will be wonderful for students and rewarding for faculty and staff, and something that we will look back on years from now and be proud of what we accomplished as a school system, as a learning community, and as a larger community. And I'm so proud to be associated with Syosset because of just the incredible way this community has pulled together to face all these challenges and face them together. So it's been a privilege to be leading this work. Obviously, there's a lot more work ahead of us, but we are looking forward to this being a great year for students. So thank you, Ms. Franklin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rogers. Are there any questions for Dr. Rogers based on the superintendent's report? Mr. Gershon?
It wasn't, I don't think, mentioned in the report, but Dr. Rogers, can you speak to the status of Section 8 vis-a-vis our sports program and what implications the decision by the County of Suffolk may or may not have upon their reconsideration?
Yeah, we do have that as a discussion item later on anyway.
Sure. Well, I can make some comments and that'll set the table for your discussion later. The state is divided. The State Public High School Athletic Association is the governing body for athletics in New York State. The state is divided into 11 sections, and each one of the sections has some independence in terms of their decision making. Nassau County is considered Section 8, Suffolk County is considered Section 11. They each have their own governing bodies. The State Public High School Athletic Association indicated that they were going to follow essentially the governor's recommendations that sports could start on the 21st of September, but they left to individual sections the decision as to how to implement that. Obviously, Nassau County made the decision to delay the start of sports until January. Suffolk County just made a similar decision. The two counties obviously had a different approach a week ago. Now the two counties appear to have a similar approach. I suspect that this will, Section 8 will probably regard Section 11's decision as company in their decision. But there are obviously a number of calls for Section 8 to reconsider its decision, and they did say that they would at some point reconsider that decision before the 21st. So I think it's entirely possible that more discussions are going on at Section 8, and that's certainly something that I know you want to discuss later. And obviously, but the public may not, that you wrote a letter to Section 8 asking them to reconsider that decision and make some sports possible for this fall.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Rogers based on the superintendent's report? Mr. DeFilippo.
Thank you. With the meeting with the Department of Health with both Nassau County, Dr. Rogers, and Suffolk County, did they, is it too premature? Have they come up with any possible recommendations that can we use for improvement? I know this is a new area for everybody, including them. But it just seems maybe we should be looking at something to use in the future if this happens again. I realize the school has certain requirements with a teacher teaching X amount of periods and students throughout the day, and that exposes that teacher to X amount of students, however many it is. But is there a way, moving forward in the future, we could somehow mitigate that so we're not closing a whole entire school every time we get a case that has tested positive, and that positive, and I don't have the details, obviously, of the person who tested positive, but it could be a false positive. It could be the type of test that they took. They could have had the slightest amount of virus in their system, and certain tests like the PCR nasal test will pick that up. It won't tell you how much the person has of the virus. It will just detect it. However, if there's the slightest bit in the person's body, whether or not it's going to get worse or infect anybody.
So actually, the county health department has been very complimentary of our efforts, and I was pleased to hear that. They were complimentary both of our mechanisms for how we were doing social distancing in the buildings in order to avoid having people become close contacts in the event that someone was identified in one of the buildings. And they do have recommendations for how to move forward. I'm just not at liberty to share them because they asked that we allow them to finish their process before we start talking publicly about that. I don't think that we'll see any recommendations for changes to our reopening plan. Again, as I said, they were very complimentary of the efforts that we've made. But one of the things that as the Board of Education, that we do as an administration, after every unusual event, we debrief as a staff, and we go through all of our processes and procedures. We ask what worked well, what didn't work as expected, what we would improve, what we would do differently with hindsight based on what we learned. And we will undoubtedly debrief this once we get through the immediate event and we're on the other side of it. But they have been very good to work with, as I said, very professional, very complimentary, which I appreciate. And our school physician has been part of those conversations as well. Also incredibly accessible and very useful to us in terms of our decision making and helping us be in the best position possible to support the counties as they do their work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Chris Ulrich?
Yeah, Dr. Rogers, just to clarify, even if a teacher, student, administrator was in a school and is positive, it doesn't mean that they're spreading the disease to everybody. The real criteria the CDC uses is close contact, which is proximity without protection, 15 minutes. So given the plastic shields, the masks, the social distancing in the classrooms, does that significantly lower the risk to anybody who happened to be around somebody? Because I don't want people to have the mistaken impression that if somebody in the building had a positive test, that 100 or 200 people are automatically at risk simply because they're in the same building.
That's everything that you said is correct. So because we learned of this test late in the day on a Sunday, there was not enough resources in place to do aggressive contact tracing yesterday. So we felt that the wisest, most conservative decision would be to close the school for the day today in order not just to buy the time, but to make sure that we didn't inadvertently omit somebody that we would want to make sure we had put into protective quarantine, just even briefly. So there have been a handful of school districts that have had experiences of a positive case in the first week. And for the most part, they are not quarantining entire buildings. They are quarantining classes or people who are known to be close contacts. So we've taken a obviously very conservative approach. I don't think that that conservative approach will necessarily be automatically warranted in every situation. And one of the things we said during the reopening task force meetings is that every situation is going to present itself differently. And we are going to, there is no hard and fast rule. People have been asking for a hard and fast rule. There is none. We're going to look at all of the circumstances. And based on those circumstances, we're going to make individual determinations that are customized to every unique situation. What seemed like the right and prudent way to address this is exactly the path that we chose. But in the future, we may have a positive case and not close, as is the case with, I think, 3 other school districts on Long Island this week.
Okay, and just to clarify, the closure tomorrow is not out of a sense of caution per se, because we're obviously here, but it was more about the interagency issues dealing with the unique facts around this situation.
Exactly. So we did not want to move forward until the county health department's investigation was finalized, and they had told us that it was finalized and that we were released to implement their recommendations. So I anticipate that will happen first part of the day tomorrow, and we'll be able to move forward quickly. I had some optimism that we might get it accomplished late this afternoon, but it just became clear to me as we were coming into the board meeting that it was not going to get done in time for us to be able to make an announcement about school tomorrow. So again, the most prudent, the most cautious, the most conservative thing to do was to just continue in our current posture for one more day, and then we'll get some information from the county tomorrow, and we'll be able to communicate in a lot more detail with parents. And to your earlier point, the counties use a definition of close contact to identify people that they consider to be at risk of disease transmission. And that includes being within 6 feet. It includes not having a mask on. That would include being in someone's presence for more than 10 minutes. So you have to meet all of those criteria to be considered a close contact and therefore at risk and therefore in need of quarantine for 14 days. So they make that determination based on interviews that they conduct. And we again support them by helping them figure out who they need to interview. And then they issue their determinations, and then we execute on the plan that we work with them on developing.
Thank you.
Mr. DiFilippo?
Yes, Dr. Rogers, based upon the findings from the 2 departments of health, is there, and the extensive safety measures we have in place, including the air circulation that we use with the units, the energy recovery ventilation units, do you think any of the students will be quarantined? And if so, for how long?
Yeah, that's a question I'll answer tomorrow.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Rogers based on the superintendent's report? Okay, thank you very much. There's no correspondence or legislative items. We know that a number of emails came in with respect to audience to the public. So Dr. Rogers, if you can.
Sure, there were what totals up to be about 9 pages of emails. So I don't think it makes sense to read all of these out individually. We did sort them into themes. I'll try to respond to these by themes. So One was a suggestion that because students will be walking around with Chromebooks and the weather can sometimes be wet, or as the year goes on, the weather will undoubtedly deteriorate and become wet and snowy. Sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. Thank you, Tracy. The suggestion was that we could put together some plastic protectors, and maybe PTA might be able to do that as a fundraiser. So it's an interesting idea. We'll explore it with the leadership of PTA. Thanks for the suggestion. Question came in about children who are in the all virtual program in the high school and wanting to make sure that they have adequate attention from the teachers. That's something that we talked about extensively during the task force meetings this summer. One of the things that we recognize is that it's a challenge for teachers to manage both the in-classroom, in-person learning environment and the virtual environment simultaneously. I have a lot of confidence in our teachers' ability to get better at this over time and for them to innovate and learn from one another. But we also know that this is going to take time to master. But everyone's goal is to make sure that all students have a terrific education. And so that will take some time to get there. There were some suggestions from people about how to do that better, including structuring them like Board of Education meetings. I do know that in many classrooms, they are structured as Zoom conversations. So the hope would be that we'll become better at doing this over time. Some questions about how the virtual learning occurs in the classroom. So how the camera is focused in the classroom. The district's IT department, our technology director, Ms. Payne, one of the things that we put a lot of effort into over the summer was developing something we call the Classroom to Go. And that is a set of tools that teachers can use, more powerful laptops because we experienced some challenges with the Chromebooks, document cameras so that teachers have a virtual whiteboard that's literally at their fingertips, and a microphone to make sure that they're easier to understand even if they're wearing personal protective equipment, and a tablet so that teachers can write and annotate on the screen. So all these new tools are powerful, and we think they're very useful. And teachers will get better at using these tools together and making lessons engaging with them. Are we, questions about how we're supervising the virtual environment? Every building principal has some virtual classrooms in their buildings. Some of the buildings are larger. Obviously, the secondary buildings have several administrators in them, but all of our building administrators are working with both their in-person and virtual teachers, and all of our building leaders are working with Mr. Cardillo and Dr. Curry, the deputy and assistant superintendent, respectively, as well as the subject matter coordinators who are going into various classrooms as well to do support and sometimes observations. There are some questions about meetings with guidance counselors. One of the things that we wanted to do for this return to school, and Dr. Lamels' team has worked hard on making sure that we attend to the social and emotional needs of students. We recognize they've been out of school for 6 months, and while they may have interaction with their peers in other situations, they are certainly coming back from a very unusual situation. Some students may need more support with that than others, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing them with avenues to go find that support. So we'll continue to work on that. I don't know that there's a perfect way of doing that, but we certainly want to make sure that students know that we're here to help them. There's a question about Chromebooks and our replacement cycle for Chromebooks. So we are doing a replacement cycle for Chromebooks. We recognize that some of them are older. We have purchased a lot of new Chromebooks over the summer. Nationally, there is a constraint on the amount of supply of devices because not only Syosset, but literally every school district in America is doing some form of virtual learning, and most large city school districts are all virtual and have put tremendous pressure on the supply chains for things like Chromebooks and laptops. So we have been doing well in terms of getting supply, but there are certainly some constraints. I got a number of questions about the different methodologies for how classrooms are set up for the various buildings. As I mentioned during my introductory superintendent's report, those different models have been built in different ways for different buildings based on the number of students that are learning in person and the number of students who are learning virtually, the amount of physical space that's available in the building, and our efforts to try and staff effectively to the resources that we have. So they do look a little bit different in some buildings than others, but that's something that we've put a lot of effort into, and that Dr. Curry and Mr. Cardillo have worked very closely with the principals on. There have been a series of questions about health and safety protocols, and one thing that seems to come up repeatedly is confusion about what the mask policy is in the school district and whether it is being applied with consistency and enforced with consistency. So given that there were several questions in this vein, what I'll do tomorrow is we will reinforce that policy, but to be clear, the point behind mask wearing is that it protects all of us, it protects yourself, and it protects others. And it is what seems to me to be the single most effective thing that we can do to interrupt the transmission of the virus. And that's obviously what we all want to do in order to keep everyone safe. So we'll reinforce those protocols, but the expectation is that mask wearing is going to be the norm, that there will be brief mask breaks. The mask breaks are intentionally designed to be brief so that even if someone took a mask break, they would still not be considered to be a close contact because we don't want to force anyone into the situation where they have to quarantine for 14 days, because that's what happens when someone is a close contact. So we're trying to avoid having a situation where anyone would be considered a close contact by having the social distance, having the plexiglass barriers, and having the masks on as much of the time as possible. There's a question asking whether we had a hard and fast rule over how we would make a decision about closing the whole district or just closing a school or just closing a classroom. There really isn't an algorithm for that. As I mentioned earlier, that's something that we will work through on a case-by-case basis with the health department, hopefully just one health department at a time. The governor has said that if the positivity rate in the region, and this would be the Long Island region, Nassau and Suffolk counties, went above 9%, that he would make the decision to close all schools. So that's a decision that would be certainly out of our hands. One thing that we have been doing in Syosset is monitoring on a daily basis information about the rate, the positivity rate in Nassau County, and keeping track of that. Right now, the positivity rate is a little over 1%. It's about 1.3%. The number that we're following is a 7-day rolling average. What you see is that there's a lot of ups and downs, but over time, it sort of evens out, and the 7-day average is about 1.3%. It's slightly above the state average, which is a little below 1%. So we're keeping an eye on that, but that does not seem to be a cause for alarm at this point. So there is no hard and fast rule on when we might make a decision, not based on what we're seeing in the school, but what we're seeing in the environment around the school. I think if we got to a point where that was a decision that needed to be made, that's something that we would do in conjunction with the health department or in conjunction with authorities in Albany, but not something that we would initiate on our own, absent a case in the schools. There's a question about whether we can have school staff or students do COVID testing either on a regular basis or on a sampling basis. And this question came up at one of the PTA meetings last week as well. So there are two sections of law that allow us to require a medical examination either of a student or of a staff person. But in both cases, there has to be some reason to require that medical examination. We cannot simply demand that it be done. So we cannot require testing of staff. We cannot require testing of students. So I know New York City has made some announcements about a plan that they have. I'm not exactly clear on how they're going to implement that plan, but with what I understand of the two laws that apply here, it's not something that we would be able to require. So a question about what someone should do if they feel that a staff member or a fellow student is not adhering to our mask policies or other policies. My recommendation is always to take it up with, if you don't feel comfortable, it's always best to take something up with the teacher. But if you don't feel comfortable talking to the teacher, the next person to talk to would be the building leader, the building principal, or an assistant principal. They will be able to help you. A question about asking if we can have the COVID screening app translated into languages for families. There are a number of different screening apps that are out there. We have implemented an app. We're evaluating how well it's working. It's obviously day 5 for the app with all students in. And we're evaluating other products that are on the market as well to see if there are others that might be a better fit for our community. Obviously, we're going to stay with the one that's working now until something better comes along. But if something better comes along, we'll make an adjustment. There's a question about children running laps outside. And I would, on that, I'll defer to the FAQ. I know we've put together some FAQ on athletics, and I'll review that FAQ to see if that question specifically is addressed. There are a number of questions about the events of the last day and a half here at Southwoods Middle School, mostly questions about the individual staff members. We cannot discuss staff members in this forum for privacy reasons, so I unfortunately can't answer any of those questions. What's the protocol for reopening the school after the outbreak? And the protocol is we're required by the state to do deep cleaning. That happened yesterday. We are in today because the deep cleaning has been completed. And once we have finalized our work with the county health departments, we'll release more information about what the reopening will look like and how it will be implemented. Some questions about picking up textbooks and other materials for virtual students. I would direct you to the building principal. Each building is doing it slightly differently. And questions about how much we'll communicate on this particular incident at Southwoods or a future incident once it's over. Again, we're highly constrained by federal privacy laws. It's not just a policy of the school district. These are laws that we are required to follow. But the goal is to make sure that parents have the information they need to make good decisions about their own children, their own families. So we'll always communicate with parents if there's a decision that they need to make for themselves. But we're not able to communicate information about staff members or other students. There are 2 notes that were written to us that I will take the time to read out loud because they were written by students, and these students had hoped to come in person tonight. So I will read them. The first is from Amanda Goncalves, who is a varsity kickline co-captain. She writes, "Good evening, everyone, and thank you for providing this opportunity to share my thoughts. I'd like to take this time to tell you all how much kickline and all sports mean to the students of Syosset High School. For me personally, Kickline has shaped my entire high school experience. I believe that there is a solution if everyone comes together to create one. Kickline means the world to me and my team. We've come so far and so close to a national title. We started off my freshman year in 8th place, and last year we came in 3rd. This team is a family, and our season being over before it started, especially for our 14 seniors, is unimaginable. Telling us that we can start practicing in January simply isn't an option for us. We begin learning choreography and practicing in the fall of 2020 in order to be ready to compete in January of 2021. Just like dance class and gym class are happening during the school day with social distancing, we feel Kickline can safely begin learning choreography and practicing after school with social distancing measures in place this fall. This one request can save our entire season. We're hoping and pleading for the board to do everything they can to make this season possible and allow us to begin practicing in September. Thank you all for listening. It means so much to us. Sincerely, Amanda Goncalves, Syosset Varsity Kickline co-captain, and her other co-captain, Jillian Miller, also wanted to be here in person to speak to the board tonight. She writes, "My name is Jillian Miller, and I'm one of the captains of the Syosset Varsity Kickline team. Please forward these words to the board this evening regarding our season. Syosset Varsity Kickline has made me who I am today. I truly don't know how I would have gotten through my 4 years of high school without it. My team and my coaches have truly become a family of mine. The passion that we all share for this team is indescribable. I can't imagine not having Kickline for my senior year. Anyone who knows me knows this team is everything to me. This team has come so far, from not even making Kick finals our freshman year to placing in the top 5 in all our groups this past season. We want to win, and we want the winning jacket. This was going to be our year. We were so ready to take that first place home this year. We all want it so badly. We've worked so hard for this, and we just can't stop now. How are we supposed to stop our training until January? All of our stamina and all our hard work goes to waste. When you stop dancing for a while, it gets harder to get back into the swing of things. This team means so much to me, and I'm hoping for my last season. There are ways we can make it happen. Is it a matter of just not being allowed to practice physically in the school? Then we can practice outside the school at a dance studio that has been open, operating and following social distancing protocols. Please help us make the last year for the 14 seniors on the team the best year yet. Thank you all so much for your time and consideration." I know that they had wanted to be here in person tonight, so it's unfortunate they were unable to. And then we got a question about pickups for walkers at a particular building. Again, I would direct you to the building principal for anything that's specific to an individual building. And then lastly, the board got a thank you email for the work that was done to create the reopening plan and the work that we've been doing through the fall, and then an entreaty for us to avoid a knee-jerk reaction to close when positive cases appear. So that was a lengthy tour through the comments that you got this evening and my responses to them.
That was Dr. Rogers. So thank you for that. Thank you for your questions. Your questions help us think about things and that we may need to improve upon. Your emails of appreciation are also very encouraging to people who are working very hard to make this as great and as an experience as it can be. So thank you all very much, and thank you for Dr. Rogers for answering all of those questions. For discussion items, we had wanted to discuss the status of Section 8. Dr. Rogers gave us an update, but we wanted to be sure that in our efforts to resurrect school sports, that included a letter to Section 8. And what we really wanted to convey the entire board was how important athletics is, not just to the physical well-being of our students and remaining in shape or getting in shape, but to their mental health as well. For many of our students, athletics creates a family of people, of coaches and and teammates who are there for one another, to support one another, not only in the sport that they're playing, but in their everyday school lives and even outside of school. They feel good when they're together. They learn how to work together as a team. And when they do that, that extends to their academic life and how they treat others outside of school. I have, witnessed incredibly encouraging statements and directives to kids by coaches to, shake a hand in school today, tell somebody you appreciate them. Those are the kinds of things that they're learning from being a part of our athletic sports teams, and those messages are incredibly important. You heard from 2 students today in their letters about how they can be themselves, and they are who they are in large part because of what they've gotten out of their sports. And for sure, these feelings of self-esteem and confidence may come from sports, but they do extend to their academic lives. When you're confident in one area, it often bolsters your ability to be confident in other areas. And so the board decided to advocate to Section 8 to recommence school sports. And I hope that Section 8 does what they said they would, which is to take into consideration the opinions of the many school districts who are hoping for the season to start in the fall, and reconsider. In addition to obviously the mental health reasons, we also have the obvious, desire to play and to compete, and that's natural, but we don't want our students in Nassau to be at a disadvantage in the event that they have aspirations and the ability to play in school, in college when they graduate, to be able to get their video reels, and to be disadvantaged because other New York sections are able to play and to be seen, but our students are not. Those are just some of the reasons why this board had decided to write the letter. I'm happy to hear from any other board member who wants to speak on this issue, but that letter can be seen on our website, and we certainly do hope that Section 8 is listening. Is there anyone else who wants to say a few words about the athletic program or the letter? Okay. The next item on discussion items is the New York State School Boards Association annual business meeting voting delegate. So every year at the conference for the School Boards Association, we have one member of the board who attends the annual meeting where voting takes place on initiatives that the School Boards Association wants to bring to the state. If there is anyone who is attending, it will be virtual this year. So if we could please have a volunteer, it would be just one meeting, and the use of an alternate delegate is not going to be permitted this year. So it really can only be one person. One hand, any hand. Krista Filippo, thank you for your service. Okay, Fran, can you make a note of that, please? Thank you very much. Okay, there's no unfinished business. So with that, we will begin the A items. A1 is the approval of staff changes for certified staff. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Tom Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A2 is the revised approval of appointment of interim deputy superintendent of schools. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A3 is the revised appointment of interim assistant superintendent for curriculum, instruction, and technology. May I have a motion, please? Ms. Chang, seconded by Mr. DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A4 is the appointment of interim executive director of human resources, Dr. Tom Caramore. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Ms. Falcove. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A5 is the approval of the 2020-2021 stipends and hourly rate activities. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Gershon, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? A6 is the approval of coaching recommendations for fall 2020. May I have a motion, please? Chris DiFilippo, seconded by Carol Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B1 is the recommendation of the Committee on Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Falcove. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B2 is the recommendation of the Committee on Preschool Special Education. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Ms. Chang. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B3 is the appointment to the out-of-district subcommittees on special education. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Ms. Falcove. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B4 is the appointment to the building subcommittees on special education. May I have a motion, please? Ms. Levitan, seconded by Mr. Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B5 is the approval of a settlement agreement. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Mr. Feldman. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B6 is the appointment of residency officer, attendance officer, and Title IX coordinator, a person of many, many hats. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Susan Falcove. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B7 is the approval of new retention and disposition schedule for New York local government records. May I have a motion, please? Ms. Chang, seconded by Mr. Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? B8 is the second reading and adoption of the following policies: equal opportunity, prohibition against sexual harassment, class size, child abuse in an educational setting, privacy and security for student, teacher, and principal data, and information security breach and notification. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Mr. Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C1 is the authorization of service contracts. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C2 is the authorization for special education and or nursing contracts. May I have a motion, please? Ms. Chang, seconded by Ms. Falcove. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C3 is the authorization for Syosset High School Change Order E01 Elder. May I have a motion, please? Mr. DiFilippo, seconded by Ms. Cheng. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C4 is the authorization for cooperative contract County of Onondaga. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Gershon, seconded by Mr. DiFilippo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C5 is the adoption of grants for the school year 2020-2021. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Chris Ulrich. Are there any questions? Mr. DiFilippo.
Yes, yes, with the grants, and one of them is quite sizable, 1.4 million. Do we know when they will become active into the school district? And is there, with the amount of grant, would we have to use additional funds for that grant, or would we just work within that grant?
I'll let Dr. Lamelza and Dr. Rufo respond to that. These are annual grants that we're given every year. They are federal funds that are allocated to the school district by formula. So these are grants that come to us on an annual basis and often have, I hate using the term strings attached, but it's like we're required to spend them in certain ways. So Dr. Rufo, I'll start with you, and then maybe Dr. Lamelza can elaborate.
Yeah, I think you answered the questions. These are anticipated grants, so they are planned for, and that specific one, which is our largest grant, is one for special education.
Correct. That the large one is the special education grant, which is designed really for us to supplement, not supplant our services, but it is something that we plan for pretty consistently year to year in terms of the coverage that we generate from this grant in terms of staffing and agency contracts and equipment and other services that the students will require.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lamelza. Are there any other questions? And Dr. Rufo. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? C6 is the disposal of broken surplus and or obsolete equipment and books. May I have a motion, please? Ms. Falco, seconded by Mr. Ulrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion to adjourn. Okay. Thank you all for attending. We know there are a lot of you out there, and hopefully we've answered many of your questions today, but if you have more questions, feel free to email the district, email your board, and certainly if you have questions about your building, please speak with your building principal. Be safe, be healthy, and we hope that you have and your children have a successful rest of the month. So long.